The Nevada desert was cruel that afternoon. Heat shimmered in waves across the endless expanse of sand, bending the air itself until distant ridges looked like molten glass. Dust devils twisted lazily in the distance, the only movement in a world otherwise paralyzed under the crushing sun. In the middle of this desolation, a crowd had gathered. Dozens of soldiers, cadets, engineers, and ranking officers stood scattered around a makeshift firing line, some shading their eyes with caps, others holding cameras to record history or humiliation. All attention was fixed on the woman standing in front of the monstrous rifle set upon a sandbag rest. General Margaret Harlow had never looked more composed. She wore no medals today, no ceremonial jacket, only desert fatigues faded from years of use. The brim of her cap shadowed sharp gray eyes that betrayed neither nerves nor excitement. She scanned the rifle as if inspecting an old comrade, not a machine she had only seen unveiled the day before. The whispers swirled as thickly as, "The heat. She won't even hit near the plate," muttered a colonel with a skeptical curl of his lip. 4,000 meters? That's not a shot at science fiction. Another scoffed. She's a strategist, not a shooter. Why risk embarrassing herself? Harlow heard them, of course, she did. But she had lived her entire career listening to such words. From her first days at the academy, when instructors told her she'd never command men in combat, to her rise through ranks that resented her presence, doubt had always followed her like a shadow. She had learned not to waste energy fighting the voices directly. Better to let her work, her discipline, and her calm persistence drown them out. The engineers had set the challenge weeks earlier. They had developed a custom rifle chambered in .416 caliber, designed to test theoretical limits of range and precision. A target plate had been placed 4 kilometers across the desert valley, a distance so great that even through high-powered optics, it wavered like a phantom in the mirage. No human had ever struck such a mark in a public demonstration. Some had whispered the whole stunt was a cover for defense contractors to boast about new technology. When Harlow volunteered to take the shot, the room had fallen silent. Now, under the desert sun, that silence returned, heavy and suffocating. The general crouched beside the rifle, brushing grit from its barrel with her glove. She was not a sniper. She had never claimed to be. Her expertise was in strategy, logistics, leadership. But that had always been her advantage. People assumed she lacked the patience, the technical mind, the precision to master a weapon. They underestimated her. And she had spent years ensuring that their assumptions would one day collapse. Target confirmed at 4,000 meters, the range officer announced through a megaphone. His voice cracked slightly, betraying his own disbelief. Harlow looked toward the valley. The steel silhouette was barely discernible, a speck of gray against the shifting horizon. Around her, the murmurs continued, but she shut them out. In her mind, the target was no farther than the chalk outlines she had once drawn as a cadet, practicing with standard rifles. Distance was only numbers, and numbers could be managed. She remembered long nights years ago, after meetings ended and lights dimmed in command offices. Alone in her quarters, she would open books on physics, wind tables, manuals on long-range shooting. She would test herself, running calculations until the formulas became instinct. Most generals passed such tasks to others. She had made them her private ritual. Now, standing in the furnace of Nevada, all that quiet preparation coiled inside her like a spring. A young cadet, acting as spotter, cleared his throat nervously. Wind, 5 knots from the east, ma'am. Temperature, 102. Humidity negligible. Coriolis correction, minimal at this latitude. She gave a single nod. Her gloved hands adjusted the scope with the precision of a surgeon. The cadet stole a glance at her face, expecting to see tension, perhaps hesitation. Instead, he saw the calm of someone who had already accepted the outcome. Behind them, the colonel whispered again, just loud enough for others to hear. "She won't make it. This isn't a movie." Harlow pressed her cheek against the rifle's stock. The metal was hot from the sun, but she barely noticed. Through the scope, the target swam, distorted by the heat rising off the desert floor. She blinked once, letting her vision settle, then slowed her breathing until it matched the rhythm she had practiced for decades. Inhale, hold, exhale, steady. The crowd hushed. Cameras focused. Soldiers leaned forward, shading their eyes against the glare. Her finger brushed the trigger, not pulling, only touching, as if testing the line between thought and action. For a moment, she wasn't in Nevada. She was back at the academy, surrounded by men who doubted she belonged. She was in briefing rooms, ignored when she spoke. She was in combat zones, told to stand back while others faltered. Every dismissal, every smirk, every closed door condensed into a single pinpoint of steel on the horizon. She exhaled. The trigger broke cleanly beneath her finger. The rifle's roar shattered the desert silence, echoing across the valley like thunder trapped. In a canyon, recoil hammered into her shoulder, grounding her, but her eyes never left the scope. Somewhere in the distance, a bullet sliced through the superheated air, racing faster than the sound that chased it. The crowd waited, breath caught in throats. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The bullet was long gone, yet the desert remained mute. And then, the rifle's echo faded, leaving the desert in an uncanny silence. Dust swirled lazily around the sandbags, carried by a faint breeze that rippled across the valley. The soldiers, cadets, and engineers froze, their eyes locked on the distant horizon where the target waited 4 kilometers away. The heat waves dancing above the desert floor made the steel plate shimmer like a mirage, impossible to discern with the naked eye. No one spoke, no one breathed aloud. In that brief, suspended moment, time seemed to stretch. The desert had become a cathedral of expectation. Every soldier's heart beat audibly to them alone. The young cadet acting as spotter's hands shook slightly as he gripped his binoculars. Engineers squinted at monitors, trying to track the yaw. Bullet's trajectory with sensors and high-speed cameras, but all technology felt futile against what was about to happen. Harlow lowered herself slightly behind the rifle, resting her cheek against the stock again, even though the shot had been fired. Her eyes were still on the horizon, calculating, measuring, almost communicating silently with the invisible projectile. Every factor mattered: wind, temperature, barometric pressure, the spin imparted to the bullet by the barrel rifling, and the subtle deflection caused by the Earth's rotation. She had calculated it all, but physics was never merciful. Across the desert, the bullet tore through space faster than anyone could see. The supersonic projectile cut the air in a straight line, though the journey was anything but simple. Wind gusts buffeted, invisible currents tugged it sideways, and heat ripples bent the light around it like an optical illusion. Yet the bullet carried momentum, guided by the exact hand, eye, and mind that had fired it. In the valley, whispers of doubt grew louder. "Maybe it will just fall short," someone muttered, unable to hide the nervous edge in their voice. "Or miss completely," another added, staring through their binoculars, as if sheer will could alter physics. But Harlow's calm was uncheckable. She had learned long ago that doubt and fear belonged to others. They were useless in battle and fatal in judgment. What mattered was precision, patience, and observation. The world around her, the shouting, the murmurs, the clanking of equipment slipped away, leaving only the line between her and the target. Cadets held their breath, feeling history in motion. To them, the desert had become infinite, each grain of sand stretching the seconds further and further. Some tried to calculate it themselves, scanning the horizon, wondering where the bullet would land. Others simply watched, suspended between awe and terror, knowing they were witnessing a moment that would be told for decades. Harlow's spotter tracked the bullet with precision instruments, though he knew that technology could only report so much. The bullet was moving faster than sound, faster than eyes could follow. It was a whisper of metal through air, invisible to ordinary perception, yet impossible to ignore. His hands hovered over the rangefinder, not daring to move too quickly. Every measurement, every decimal mattered. One error could erase the entire experiment, but there would be no error not with her at the helm. Behind them, a group of engineers muttered amongst themselves, checking readings and formulas. Some scrawled notes frantically, trying to verify calculations they had done weeks earlier. Others simply leaned on their equipment, silently hoping that the shot would succeed, even though they didn't dare voice it. If it hit, it would be more than a demonstration. It would be a message. A message about discipline, skill, and what could be accomplished when preparation met audacity. As the bullet continued its flight, a heat shimmer distorted its path visually, though not physically. The steel plate seemed to dance in and out of existence, teasing the eyes of those watching. Some began to question what they were seeing. Had the bullet veered? Was it already too late? But Harlow's eyes never wavered. She had memorized every potential anomaly, every shift in air pressure and gravitational pull. Her focus was absolute. Inside her mind, she traced the bullet's path as if drawing a line on a map. Every meter, every centimeter, every microsecond was accounted for. She recalled the nights she had spent poring over manuals and charts, experimenting. With rifles of lesser calibers, running calculations in her head until formulas felt like second nature. Each repetition, each failure, had built toward this exact instant. She knew the physics. She knew the variables. She trusted herself. The cadets watched her, trying to read a hint of emotion, a crack in her armor. They saw only confidence, but they also sensed tension that was entirely different from fear. This was anticipation, focus, mastery. She was not merely waiting to see what would happen. She was coexisting with the bullet mid-flight, as though her mind traveled faster than physics allowed. Minutes felt like hours. Some soldiers fidgeted, others leaned heavily on their rifles or sandbags. One engineer whispered a quiet prayer. Another quietly cursed the suspense. Cameras and drones hovered, capturing angles no human eye could follow. Yet the essence of the moment, the collision of human skill and extreme distance, escaped even the best technology. Harlow's mind did not wander. She considered trajectory, wind deflection, bullet drop, even the effect of sunlight heating. The steel plate itself. Every possible factor that could alter the outcome had been considered, measured, and neutralized. Yet the silence pressed upon her, heavy with expectation. She could almost hear the collective pulse of the crowd, a rhythm of doubt and hope intertwined. Somewhere across the valley, a solitary desert hawk wheeled in lazy circles, oblivious to the tension below. Its shadow passed across the shimmering target like a fleeting omen, unnoticed by all but Harlow, who registered it as part of the calculation of light and shadow, temperature, and potential refraction. Everything mattered. Nothing could be overlooked. She exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly, as though the air itself needed to be timed. The desert held its breath with her. The bullet continued its supersonic journey, invisible but real, untouchable yet undeniable. It was both a product of human intellect and a violent reminder of physics' absolute authority. Some in the crowd began to murmur again. "Maybe it will curve," one whispered. "It's too far. It's impossible." Others shook their heads, muttering about luck and chance. Yet the engineers, trained and rational, were silent, staring at instruments that confirmed what Harlow already knew. The bullet was on its intended path. Harlow lowered herself slightly behind the rifle again, not to aim, but to center herself. She had trained for this. She had prepared her body and mind to remain still for hours if necessary. Every inch of muscle was relaxed yet ready, every nerve alert yet calm. She felt the vibration of the rifle settle into the sandbags, a silent acknowledgement of the moment. The cadets held their breath collectively, feeling as if the desert itself had paused. The air shimmered, the ground seemed more expansive, and every shadow appeared sharper against the sun-baked terrain. Even those who doubted could not help but feel the weight of the moment pressing against them, the sense that they were witnessing history in real time. The bullet, racing faster than the sound that had announced its departure, neared the target. Its path was pure, undisturbed, a testament to every calculation, every hour of preparation, every dismissal Harlow had ever endured. She allowed herself one small, imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement that her plan was unfolding perfectly. Then finally, a first hint of motion reached the observers. The target plate, a tiny dot against the wavering horizon, seemed to flicker. Was it heat, mirage, or reality? Eyes squinted. Instruments recorded data in rapid succession. And then, as the final seconds stretched into eternity, the steel target rang out a metallic, crystalline clang that echoed across the valley like the collapse of doubt itself. The soldiers erupted in astonished exclamations. Cadets clapped and cheered, though some were too stunned to speak. Engineers shook their heads, grinning despite themselves. The colonel who had doubted muttered, "Impossible." She did. The echo bounced between ridges, a sound that seemed to carry more weight than 1,000 speeches. Harlow lowered the rifle slowly, her face unreadable, but her eyes sharp, gleaming with quiet satisfaction. She did not smile. Triumph was irrelevant. Discipline, calculation, and focus had spoken louder than any applause. She had not aimed to impress. She had aimed to execute perfection in its purest form. For the cadets, the engineers, the soldiers, and even the doubting colonel, the lesson was clear. Boundaries existed only for those who accepted them. And in the Nevada desert, one woman had rewritten what human skill could accomplish. The desert returned to its natural state, winds stirring dust across the valley. The sun continued its merciless march across the sky. Yet the impact, both literal and symbolic, would linger in memory far longer than the day itself. Harlow stepped back from the rifle, her posture as calm and collected as it had been all along. She had faced doubt, distance, and physics itself and emerged victorious. The moment was complete. The impossible had been accomplished. And everyone present knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would be told for decades. A bullet that had arrived before the sound, a general who had defied expectation, and a lesson in precision, patience, and courage that no echo could ever erase. The metallic clang still hung in the air, vibrating faintly across the Nevada desert, even as the sun glared down with merciless heat. Soldiers and cadets stared in disbelief, some clutching their helmets, others pressing hands to faces, unable to reconcile what they had seen. The steel target, once a distant speck, now bore the unmistakable mark of precision, a clean indentation at the exact point Harlow had aimed for. For a heartbeat, the world seemed frozen, time held hostage by. A moment that had exceeded imagination. No one moved immediately. Even the engineers, whose instruments had already confirmed the shot's perfection, blinked as if the numbers themselves had betrayed reality. The cadets whispered, voices tinged with awe. She actually did it, one breathed. Impossible. Harlow lowered the rifle slowly, her expression unreadable, yet inside, a quiet satisfaction stirred. This was not triumph. This was clarity. Every calculation, every sleepless night, every doubt she had endured, it had all led to this instantaneous proof. The bullet had traveled 4,000 meters, faster than sound, and had struck the target before the desert itself could announce its arrival. The range officer cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said cautiously, "the target has been successfully engaged. Unbelievable, yes, but confirmed." Murmurs erupted into a chaotic mixture of cheers, disbelief, and hurried conversations. Some officers immediately began inspecting their data, scribbling notes furiously. Engineers double-checked sensors, calculating trajectories and environmental effects again, as if repeating the numbers would make the miracle less improbable. Yet no formula, no sensor, no human assessment could change the undeniable truth. Harlow had done the impossible. The colonel who had earlier whispered doubts stepped forward, his face pale, jaw tight. He approached Harlow cautiously, almost reverentially, as if proximity to her now carried a sacred weight. "General, I didn't believe it could be done," he admitted, voice cracking slightly. "I misjudged you." Harlow nodded faintly, not as a gesture of victory, but acknowledgement. Doubt had always been part of her journey. She had learned to let it flow past her without entangling her focus. "It's physics, not luck," she replied, her tone steady, almost academic. "Calculations, preparation, patience. Anyone can execute it with the right training and discipline." The cadets stared wide-eyed, some taking notes furiously, others simply absorbing the moment. Many had come with dreams of military glory, but today they had witnessed something far rarer: mastery, persistence, and courage. They whispered amongst themselves, debating if what they had seen could truly be humanly achieved. Some refused to believe the spectacle was real. Others already told themselves this was the story they would recount for the rest of their lives. In the distance, the steel plate still gleamed faintly under the sun, the mark of Harlow's shot standing as both a testament and a challenge. The bullet had left a mark, not only in steel but in history, a physical confirmation of possibility that no voice of doubt could erase. Harlow stepped back from the rifle, finally allowing herself to breathe fully. The desert air was thick with heat and dust, yet it also carried the quiet hum of awe, like static electricity after a storm. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the recoil still vibrating in her shoulder, and considered what had just occurred. This moment was not about personal triumph, not about proving others wrong. It was about precision, discipline, and the unyielding pursuit of mastery. Reporters, who had been waiting at the periphery, surged forward at once, microphones and cameras, capturing the stunned silence, the erupted applause, and the single figure at the center of it all. Flashbulbs stuttered, casting harsh light across sweat-streaked faces, while journalists shouted questions at once. "General Harlow, how did you do it? Was it luck, technology, or skill? Did you ever doubt yourself?" Harlow ignored most of the clamor. She allowed one reporter close enough to hear, and her answer was concise: discipline and preparation. Everything else is commentary. The journalist scribbled furiously, noting her calm demeanor, her unwavering focus, and the fact that she had accomplished what had been widely regarded as impossible. The words would later echo across news outlets, dominate headlines, and circulate on social media. General Harlow strikes impossible target at 4,000 meters. Videos would be replayed countless times, slow-motion frames studied by experts, each one trying to reverse engineer what had been achieved in that single invisible instant. Yet beyond headlines and data, the real impact of the shot was subtler, deeper. Young cadets who had grown up hearing tales of impossible feats realized that the line between extraordinary and achievable was often drawn only by imagination and effort. Women and men alike who had faced doubts, barriers, or disbelief saw a living example. Limits existed only for those who accepted them. Harlow herself remained largely silent, letting the reactions unfold around her. To some, this stoicism seemed cold, even severe, but in reality, it was an extension of her character. She understood the difference between spectacle and action, between ego and execution. Today's lesson was not for her. It was for the witnesses, the observers, the next generation who might one day take a similar leap in their own fields. After a few moments, the crowd began to move, some congratulating her, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The cadets were still glued to the horizon, staring at the now obvious mark, whispering in reverent tones. Engineers and technicians busied themselves with data collection, recalculating wind, distance, and bullet behavior, their respect evident in their meticulous attention to detail. Even the colonel who had doubted her now stood quietly, a mixture of humility and astonishment etched across his face. A young female cadet approached Harlow hesitantly, clutching her notebook like a shield. "General, I want to do what you did someday," she admitted, voice trembling. "I want to prove I can." Harlow's eyes softened, just slightly. She knelt to the cadet's level, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Then start preparing," she said gently but firmly. "Master the fundamentals. Learn patience. Accept that most will doubt you, and let that fuel your focus rather than distract it. Impossible is just a word. Precision is proof." The cadet nodded, eyes shining with determination, absorbing every word as if it were a map to the future. Around them, other cadets exchanged glances, whispers spreading through the group. This is what leadership looks like. This is what mastery looks like. Meanwhile, the engineers packed up their instruments, shaking heads in disbelief at the bullet's path. Calculators and formulas could explain the physics, but not the human element, the instinct, focus, and discipline that had directed it. They knew that while technology had assisted, it had not achieved the result. It had only provided the tools. The final execution had come entirely from Harlow herself. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Even as the heat intensified, the energy of the moment lingered, carrying a resonance far beyond the valley. Stories would spread to other bases, other academies, and eventually to civilians who would marvel at the feat. The name General Margaret Harlow would become synonymous with precision, courage, and the audacity to defy limitations. In a quiet moment, Harlow looked out toward the distant mountains, imagining the bullet's invisible trajectory, its unbroken line of purpose. She felt no pride, only satisfaction at flawless execution. Years of preparation, years of doubt, years of quiet discipline, all had converged in this instant. And she knew, as she always had, that true mastery was not about applause, but about silent proof delivered in the crucible of reality. Even as the crowd dispersed, the echoes of that clang lingered. It was a sound that would haunt skepticism, embolden the curious, and inspire those willing to study, prepare, and execute with the same rigor. Harlow walked back to her vehicle slowly, her shadow stretching long across the sand, each step measured, deliberate, controlled. Behind her, the steel plate glinted faintly under the afternoon sun, an immutable record of impossible precision achieved by relentless determination. By the time evening fell, news crews had sent footage across networks, and social media erupted. Experts dissected the shot, debating wind correction, bullet velocity, and technical merit, while ordinary viewers marveled at the sheer audacity. Yet amidst all the fanfare, Harlow remained apart, knowing that the real lesson would not come from headlines or applause, but from those willing to learn the discipline and patience required to achieve what others called impossible. As night descended over the desert, a cool wind swept across the valley. The soldiers, cadets, and engineers departed, leaving behind only the rifle, the sandbags, and the distant steel target. Yet the moment would linger, etched not only into metal, but into the minds of everyone present, a testament to the precision, focus, and unyielding determination of a general who had defied every expectation and reached farther than anyone had thought possible. The desert had quieted, but the impact of Harlow's shot rippled far beyond the valley. By evening, news crews had transmitted footage across networks, and social media erupted in a storm of awe, speculation, and incredulity. Video clips looped endlessly. The flash of the rifle, the bullet disappearing into the heat haze, the faint metallic clang of the steel target struck precisely where she had aimed. Viewers replayed it, frame by frame, trying to comprehend what mere human hands had achieved. Across the country, people leaned closer to their screens, disbelief and admiration mingling with every replay. Newspapers ran bold headlines: General Harlow defies physics. Impossible shot achieved. Bullet arrives before sound. Analysts debated endlessly. Scientists argued about wind conditions, air density, and the Coriolis effect. Defense contractors celebrated, eager to claim their technology had made the feat possible, while Harlow remained in her hotel room, silent, reflecting on the moment with the calm she had maintained in the desert. To her, it was not a spectacle. It was proof of discipline, preparation, and execution. The phone calls started almost immediately. Senior officers called to congratulate her, though some couched their praise in disbelief. "I never thought it could be done," one admitted. "You've exceeded every expectation." Politicians and journalists sought interviews, eager to exploit the story for ratings or political gain. Harlow declined most, offering only brief, measured statements. It was physics and preparation. Everything else is commentary. Cadets who had witnessed the shot shared stories with friends and family, creating a ripple effect that spread far beyond the military community. They recounted every detail: the shimmer of the distant target, the tension in the air, the way Harlow exhaled and squeezed the trigger as if time itself paused for her. Letters and messages began arriving at her office, not all official. Some were from veterans inspired by her precision, others from young women and men who felt that, for the first time, limits could be challenged. Inside the military, reactions varied. Traditionalists and skeptics murmured about luck, environmental conditions, or experimental weaponry. Yet every report and video confirmed the same outcome. The bullet had traveled 4,000 meters, faster than the sound, and struck exactly where intended. Harlow's achievement was not a fluke. It was intentional, calculated, and perfectly executed. Even her most ardent critics struggled to refute the evidence. In quiet moments, Harlow reflected on the personal journey that had led her here. She thought of the cadet who had first doubted her abilities, the instructors who had dismissed her in training, and the officers who had questioned her place in leadership. Each moment of skepticism had sharpened her, honed her, prepared her to execute what others deemed impossible. It was not revenge she sought, but mastery. Every challenge, every obstacle, had been a step toward proving what preparation and discipline could achieve. Her thoughts drifted to the long hours spent studying ballistics, physics, and atmospheric conditions, the nights poring over manuals. In dimly lit quarters, the endless calculations, the repeated trials with smaller calibers, all had been invisible to those around her. Yet those quiet hours had built the foundation for the moment that now defined her career. Every person watching the video saw the result, but none could witness the decades of unseen work it represented. Meanwhile, reporters were relentless. They pursued stories of her career, her strategy in previous military operations, her rise through ranks that had traditionally excluded women. Some framed her shot as symbolic, a metaphor for breaking barriers. Others fixated on technical details: bullet velocity, spin drift, and the remarkable accuracy over such an extraordinary distance. Every article emphasized the apparent impossibility of the feat, but Harlow continued to insist it was neither luck nor magic. Discipline, preparation, and execution, she repeated. The story also reached young cadets and recruits who had only known Harlow through reputation. They studied her methods, analyzed videos, and read every word she had written or spoken. Her calm demeanor, methodical approach, and focus became instructional in itself. In classrooms and barracks across the country, instructors used her shot as a case study in physics, mathematics, and leadership, showing how preparation could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Yet amid the attention, Harlow remained grounded. She understood that public fascination was transient, that applause and media coverage faded, and that the true measure of her accomplishment lay not in headlines, but in the impact it had on those willing to learn. The young cadet who had approached her in the desert, inspired and trembling, was proof that the lesson had already taken root. Inspiration, she knew, was more enduring than fame. As the evening grew darker, Harlow returned to her quarters, where she reviewed footage and calculations once more. She measured wind speeds, humidity, and bullet velocity, confirming that every variable had performed precisely as expected. The shot had been perfect. It had executed exactly as she had planned, leaving no margin for error. And yet, she felt no elation, only calm satisfaction at the realization that preparation and discipline had manifested in reality. Across the nation, conversations shifted from disbelief to admiration. Military forums debated the implications, while civilian analysts speculated about future applications in technology and defense. Everyone wanted to understand how a human being could accomplish something that seemed to defy physics. Yet the answer was simple: focus, study, and unwavering commitment. The bullet was not magic. It was the result of years of unseen effort, converging in one flawless execution. In her own mind, Harlow reflected on the lessons she had learned decades ago. Mastery comes not from proving others wrong, but from proving yourself capable, again and again, in controlled, deliberate actions. The desert, the target, the bullet, they were symbols. But the real achievement was the process, the quiet accumulation of skill, knowledge, and patience over years. Even as accolades and analyses flooded in, she knew that future challenges would be just as demanding. The desert shot would not define her career. It would only mark a single milestone in a lifetime of discipline. Yet she also understood its power. In one instant, she had rewritten expectations, proving to herself, the military, and the world what could be accomplished with preparation and focus. By nightfall, media coverage had shifted to profiles of Harlow's career, her rise to general, and the barriers she had overcome. Interviews analyzed her every decision, from choosing the rifle to calculating trajectory. Military academies began circulating videos, emphasizing leadership lessons and the importance of study and discipline. Her name, once known only within military circles, now carried symbolic weight beyond them. The next day, Harlow visited the training grounds once more. The steel target still gleamed faintly, a silent witness to her precision. Cadets and soldiers gathered, eager to hear her reflections. She spoke to them not of fame, but of focus, calculation, and mastery. "Impossible is only a word," she said, repeating her familiar phrase. "Preparation is proof. Discipline is the pathway. Execution is everything." The cadets listened, rapt, understanding that they were learning more than marksmanship. They were learning the principles of mastery itself. They understood that limits were not fixed, but flexible, and that audacity without preparation was nothing. Harlow had demonstrated not only skill, but the mindset required to achieve the extraordinary. Even the engineers and officers who had doubted her approached quietly, now humbled. They had witnessed precision at the human limit. The bullet, faster than sound, had struck steel with perfect accuracy. Yet it was not the technology alone that had made this possible. It was the mind behind it. Every detail had been anticipated, every variable accounted for, and the execution flawless. Harlow returned to her quarters once more, reflecting on the events of the past day. She had accomplished what few believed possible. Yet she understood that attention was fleeting, and legend alone did not sustain mastery. The lessons were meant to inspire, to educate, and to challenge those willing to follow in her path. The bullet had spoken. The world had listened. Now, it was up to those who were willing to act. The night grew quiet, stars emerging over the desert like silent witnesses. The rifle rested in its case. The steel target remained at the edge of the valley, and Harlow's mind was already moving to the next challenge. For her, mastery was not a moment, but a continuum. The impossible had been achieved today, but tomorrow would demand the same focus, patience, and discipline. And somewhere deep in her mind, Harlow allowed herself the faintest acknowledgement. The desert, the bullet, the target, they were not merely evidence of skill. They were symbols of what humanity could achieve when preparation, precision, and courage converged perfectly. For those who would follow her path, this moment would inspire far beyond the Nevada desert, echoing faster than sound and resonating longer than any headline could endure. By the following morning, the story had crossed borders. News networks from Europe to Asia carried footage of the desert shot, replaying it endlessly, with commentators expressing disbelief and admiration in equal measure. Analysts tried to dissect the event scientifically, estimating bullet speed, atmospheric effects, and potential error margins. Every military expert and armaments engineer had a theory, but even the best minds could not fully account for the human element. The precision, the control, the perfect execution, it had transcended technology. Harlow's bullet had arrived before the sound, and no calculation could capture the resolve behind it. Across the Pentagon and other military installations worldwide, conversations shifted from technical curiosity to strategic awe. If a general could perform such a shot with a high-caliber rifle, what did it say about training, preparation, and leadership at the highest levels? Harlow became a case study overnight, not only in marksmanship, but in leadership under extreme pressure. Her career, once quietly respected, was now internationally recognized. But Harlow did not celebrate. She understood the real story lay not in headlines, but in the lessons that could be drawn by those willing to absorb them. In the military community, debate raged. Some traditionalists argued that the feat was irrelevant outside controlled environments. In real combat, conditions are different, they muttered, attempting to diminish the accomplishment. Others, however, pointed to the principle demonstrated. Focus, preparation, and discipline could achieve extraordinary results, no matter the context. The shot was symbolic as much as it was practical, a testament to human capacity when mind and skill aligned. Harlow herself continued to treat the event with professional detachment. Her mornings were spent reviewing ballistics data, recalculating environmental factors, and ensuring every detail had been recorded correctly. While media attention and social acclaim swirled around her, she focused on internal metrics. Victory was measured not in applause, but in accuracy, process, and repeatability. She had never performed for the sake of recognition. Every achievement was simply a reflection of preparation. Letters began arriving from all over the world. Some were from military students, others from civilians, inspired by her focus and determination. One message from a young woman in a small European town read, You showed me that limits exist only if you accept them. I will study, prepare, and push myself because of your shot." Harlow read it quietly, folding the letter into her personal archive. This was the impact she had hoped for: the silent, enduring transformation that could not be captured in cameras or calculations. Meanwhile, the engineers who had built the rifle were inundated with inquiries. Defense contractors touted the precision of the weapon, claiming it had facilitated the historic shot. While technically accurate, they failed to account for the guiding mind behind it. Harlow had executed every adjustment perfectly, accounting for wind, temperature, Coriolis effect, and the faint mirage of heat above the desert floor. No technology alone could have achieved the feat. The bullet had obeyed human mastery before. Physics could even announce its presence. Cadets at military academies replayed the footage obsessively, analyzing every angle. Some debated the exact trajectory, while others discussed the discipline required to execute such a perfect shot. In classrooms, instructors paused lessons to show the video as a lesson in patience, calculation, and mental fortitude. Students realized the message was not simply about hitting a target, it was about mastering every detail, internalizing knowledge, and performing flawlessly under extreme pressure. Harlow had given them more than inspiration. She had provided a blueprint for excellence. Political figures also weighed in. Some used her feat to highlight national pride, emphasizing the blend of human skill and American technology. Others attempted to politicize the achievement, linking it to defense budgets and military programs. Harlow, aware of these interpretations, maintained silence. She understood the story was not hers to tell in political terms. The bullet, the target. The desert, they had already spoken. The meaning belonged to those willing to study, learn, and execute with similar precision. The young cadet who had first approached Harlow in the desert became a minor sensation among recruits, often retelling the story of the impossible shot and how it inspired her determination. Harlow, in private, encouraged correspondence with cadets who had written to her. She offered guidance, not accolades, emphasizing that mastery was cultivated in quiet moments of repetition, calculation, and unwavering focus. Fame could inspire attention, but only discipline could produce results. Inside Harlow's personal reflection, the shot became a mirror for every obstacle she had faced. She thought of instructors who doubted her, colleagues who questioned her, leadership, and the systemic barriers she had overcome as a woman in a male-dominated military hierarchy. Every instance of skepticism, every moment of dismissal had been fuel. The bullet that traveled faster than sound was not only proof of physical skill, but a testament to endurance, persistence, and mental clarity. Back at the Nevada range, technicians began reviewing footage frame by frame. The rifle's mechanics performed perfectly, but more remarkable was Harlow's handling of it. Minimal movement, deliberate breathing, and flawless trigger control. The theoretical calculations matched her execution almost perfectly, a rare alignment of mind, body, and technology. It was the kind of perfection rarely seen in military history, earning respect even from those who had doubted her. Public fascination continued to grow. Online, forums debated whether the shot could ever be replicated. Some claimed the bullet defied logic. Others analyzed technical data obsessively. Harlow remained removed from the spectacle. She allowed the phenomenon to unfold externally, while internally she reviewed her own performance. Victory, she believed, was measured by precision and repeatability, not by applause or speculation. She had proven what she had set out to prove, and all else was secondary. The shot also had a profound psychological impact within the military. Soldiers and cadets recognized that mastery was attainable through preparation and focus, that skill could transcend physical limitations when combined with discipline and calculation. Harlow's success became a lesson in confidence and control, particularly for those who had been told their abilities were inherently limited. The bullet had traveled not only across 4,000 meters of desert, but also through the landscape of doubt and expectation, leaving proof for anyone willing to see it. As the weeks passed, Harlow's achievement continued to inspire. Young cadets emulated her calm precision in drills, meticulously tracking variables and adjusting for minor details. Officers cited the shot in leadership seminars, emphasizing the integration of preparation and execution. Engineers refined calculations and equipment, learning from her example how human oversight could elevate technology to extraordinary results. The desert moment became a living classroom, transcending its initial spectacle to shape training practices and the military's understanding of mastery. Amid the attention, Harlow reflected privately on the nature of accomplishment. The bullet had arrived before the sound, and the target had yielded under perfect conditions. But the real victory lay elsewhere, in the persistence, focus, and courage to take the shot at all. She had demonstrated more than marksmanship. She had revealed what was possible when preparation met courage and calculation met execution. The lesson was clear. Impossible was only a word, and mastery was a process, not a moment. Late at night, alone in her quarters, she reviewed letters and footage. The message was consistent: inspiration, awe, and determination. Some called it miraculous. She called it expected, a product of careful planning. She understood that legend would grow, that her name would carry symbolic weight far beyond the military. Yet she remained detached from ego, aware that each moment of preparation mattered far more than any narrative the world constructed. Even as international attention mounted, Harlow continued training, studying, and mentoring. She remained focused on the next challenge, knowing that mastery was cumulative. The desert shot was a milestone, a proof of principle, but it was not an endpoint. She returned to exercises with cadets and soldiers, reinforcing the principles she had demonstrated: calculation, patience, focus, and precision. The bullet that had struck before the sound would echo forever, but the lessons it carried were far more enduring. Through it all, Harlow maintained perspective. The moment of perfection belonged to no single person. It belonged to preparation, to discipline, and to the quiet mastery that had brought her to that desert plateau. The world had witnessed a remarkable feat, yet the true significance lay in what it represented: that focus, preparation, and courage could overcome doubt, distance, and expectation. By the end of the month, her shot had become a legend, studied, analyzed, and retold. Cadets across continents sent letters, experts debated methodology, and journalists chronicled every detail. Harlow, however, remained unchanged, quietly mentoring, training, and preparing. For her, mastery was a lifelong pursuit, and the bullet, that had traveled 4,000 meters faster than sound, was only the beginning of what could be achieved by those willing to embrace discipline over doubt. Weeks passed, and the desert shot became more than a headline. It became a benchmark. General Margaret Harlow, once simply a respected strategist within the military, was now a symbol of audacity, discipline, and precision. Discussions in command. Rooms across the country referenced her achievement, not as a stunt, but as a case study in human capability, leadership, and calculated risk. Yet alongside admiration arose skepticism, voices questioning whether such perfection could be replicated under less controlled circumstances. In her office, Harlow reviewed technical reports submitted by analysts eager to understand the shot in exhaustive detail. She skimmed charts of trajectory, air density, and spin rates, confirming yet again a flawless execution. No error, no miscalculation, everything had aligned perfectly. Still, she understood the broader impact of skepticism. It drove conversation, challenged assumptions, and ultimately reinforced the significance of precision over luck. The critics were persistent. Some questioned the integrity of the measurements, suggesting the steel target might have shifted or that environmental conditions had favored the shot. Others posited that advanced technology had done the work, downplaying Harlow's contribution. She absorbed these doubts with equanimity, recognizing them as inevitable when boundaries were pushed. Skepticism, she knew, was a tool as much as a challenge. It forced scrutiny, demanded proof, and elevated the achievement by contrast. Meanwhile, cadets and young soldiers began emulating her methods. Training programs incorporated her desert, shot into lessons on patience, planning, and mental focus. Observers noted how cadets mirrored Harlow's deliberate breathing, her systematic adjustments, and her steady control under pressure. The bullet had struck steel 4 kilometers away, but the true mark was the change in mindset it induced. Students learned that obstacles, doubt, and physical distance could be overcome through discipline and methodical preparation. Public fascination continued to grow. Television networks replayed the footage in slow motion, highlighting the subtle shimmer of heat above the desert floor, the moment Harlow's finger eased on the trigger, and the near-invisible flight of the bullet. Commentators analyzed the shot in minute detail, speculating on the technical mastery involved. Academics debated its significance in physics seminars, while motivational speakers referenced it as an example of human potential. Even casual viewers were captivated. Few could resist marveling at a human skill so precise it seemed to defy reality itself. Harlow, however, remained grounded. She understood that the allure of spectacle often overshadowed substance. The bullet's trajectory was impressive, yes, but it was a byproduct of preparation, calculation, and focus. Without those foundations, the shot would have been impossible. She repeated this principle quietly in training sessions. Mastery is the sum of meticulous effort, not a sudden leap of genius. Every cadet and officer she mentored internalized this lesson, slowly realizing that impossible feats were attainable through deliberate practice. The international community took notice. Military analysts from other countries reviewed the footage, attempting to recreate the conditions in simulations. Some dismissed it outright, claiming that no human could consistently replicate the precision. Others acknowledged the skill involved, emphasizing Harlow's unique combination of focus, technical knowledge, and calm under pressure. Reports circulated on forums in Europe and Asia, praising the discipline required and debating the implications for training and defense strategy. Harlow had inadvertently set a new global standard for precision shooting. Despite the accolades, Harlow remained deeply introspective. In quiet evenings, she revisited her own journey, from her early cadet days filled with doubt and exclusion, to her rise through the ranks in a system reluctant to recognize her capabilities. Every challenge, every dismissal, had prepared her for the moment in the desert. The bullet's flight was as much a reflection of her persistence as it was of her skill with the rifle. For Harlow, the shot was a confirmation of decades of focus, study, and relentless discipline. The skeptic's presence only reinforced the achievement. When questions arose about environmental advantages or technological support, Harlow treated them not as affronts, but as opportunities to teach. She demonstrated calculations, discussed wind correction, and explained minute adjustments to the rifle. Every explanation reinforced the same message. Mastery comes from preparation, precision, and mental focus, not luck. Even doubters eventually had to acknowledge her capability. However grudgingly, the ripple effects reached beyond the military. Universities invited Harlow to speak about the intersection of discipline, human capability, and applied physics. Engineering programs analyzed her shot as a case study, while leadership seminars emphasized the mindset it represented. Students marveled at her ability to integrate theoretical knowledge with practical execution, and many left inspired to pursue excellence in their own fields. In classrooms, the story of the bullet that arrived before the sound became more than a tale. It was a lesson in preparation, patience, and calculated risk. Within the military, her influence expanded. Senior officers sought her insights on operational strategy, inspired by her combination of precision and foresight. Cadets shared anecdotes of the desert shot with reverence, often discussing how Harlow's calm, calculated approach had guided their own development. Her example became a benchmark, not just in marksmanship, but in leadership under extreme conditions. Harlow had demonstrated that human skill, guided by discipline, could achieve outcomes previously considered impossible. Yet Harlow's focus remained internal, directed at continuous improvement. She recognized that the desert shot was a milestone, not a culmination. Each day brought new challenges, new calculations, and new opportunities for mastery. The attention of the media, the military, and the public was secondary to the work she committed herself to quietly, mentoring, training, and preparing for the next endeavor. To her, the principle remained unchanged: preparation, precision, and execution would always outweigh spectacle. Even as her reputation grew, Harlow maintained perspective. The shot had been extraordinary, yes, but it was also a demonstration of principles she had long lived by. Every calculation, every adjustment, every breath taken to steady her aim had followed a pattern developed over decades. The desert, the steel target, the supersonic bullet, they were not miracles. They were the inevitable result of mastery cultivated over time. Across the country, Harlow became a source of inspiration for women and men alike. Young officers and cadets who had faced doubt, prejudice, or barriers saw in her example the possibility of overcoming limits imposed by circumstance or expectation. Her shot was proof not only of technical skill, but of resilience, focus, and courage. The bullet had traveled 4,000 meters, faster than sound, but its echo resonated far beyond the desert, into minds and hearts willing to pursue mastery themselves. In her personal reflection, Harlow noted that the greatest impact was subtle, quiet, and enduring. Fame and media attention were fleeting. The real influence was on those who internalized her principles, who applied discipline to their own challenges, and who learned that impossible feats could be achieved with preparation and focus. Every cadet, every soldier, every young person, inspired by the desert shot, carried forward a piece of that lesson. Months later, Harlow visited the desert range again. The steel target had weathered sun and wind, but the mark of her bullet remained. She stood in silence, reflecting on the shot, the crowd, and the lessons it had imparted. The desert was still vast and unyielding, but now it bore proof that precision, discipline, and courage could transcend expectation. Harlow's eyes scanned the horizon, not in triumph, but in quiet affirmation of what had been accomplished and what still lay ahead. The story of the bullet that arrived before the sound would continue to inspire, challenge, and educate. It would be retold in classrooms, cited in engineering seminars, analyzed in military studies, and shared by cadets around the world. Yet for Harlow, the meaning remained simple. Preparation mattered more than fame, discipline more than applause, and mastery more than luck. She had demonstrated what was possible, but the real lesson was in the commitment required to achieve it. Even as attention shifted to other events, the bullet's legacy endured. Its journey across 4,000 meters of desert remained a symbol of the power of preparation and focus. The desert, the steel target, and the supersonic bullet had spoken a universal truth. When human skill, courage, and precision align, boundaries can be broken, expectations shattered, and the impossible realized. Harlow had achieved this not by accident, but by cultivating the mastery necessary to execute flawlessly when it mattered most. Months had passed since that desert morning when the steel plate had yielded to her precision. Yet the echo of the bullet's flight persisted, reverberating far beyond the Nevada Valley, across continents, across offices, classrooms, and military academies. General Margaret Harlow's name had become a benchmark for audacity, skill, and discipline. Invitations to speak arrived from everywhere: universities, military institutions, scientific symposiums, even technology conferences. Everyone wanted insight into the mind that had achieved what many had deemed impossible. But Harlow moved cautiously, understanding that fame was a double-edged sword. She began her day at dawn, as she always did. The desert had become a distant memory, replaced by a routine of briefings, mentorship sessions, and the endless review of reports and analyses related to her historic shot. While others saw her as a symbol, Harlow saw the groundwork, the years of preparation, the hours of calculations, the meticulous repetitions that had culminated in one perfect moment. In her mind, the bullet's flight was not a spectacle. It was a proof of process. Across the globe, her achievement was dissected and debated. International military analysts speculated on whether the feat could be replicated under varied conditions. European and Asian forces ran simulations to mimic the desert's exact parameters. Academics debated the physics in journals and conferences. In civilian circles, motivational speakers invoked her name as an emblem of focus and perseverance. Her impact had become both cultural and professional, a rare convergence of technical mastery and universal inspiration. Yet, with all the accolades, Harlow felt the weight of expectation. Every public appearance carried scrutiny. Every statement she made was dissected and reinterpreted, sometimes twisted to suit political, corporate, or institutional narratives. The bullet had traveled 4,000 meters in silence, but the sound of public attention never ceased. Harlow had always understood this tension, the difference between recognition and distraction, and she managed it as meticulously as she had managed the shot itself. One afternoon, she received a request to visit an international defense summit. Delegates from multiple nations were eager to hear her insights, not just on marksmanship, but on leadership, strategy, and decision-making under extreme pressure. She accepted, knowing that such forums could amplify the lessons she hoped to impart. Yet she also approached it with the same discipline she had brought to the desert: preparation, precision, and an unwavering focus on substance over spectacle. The summit was a swirl of activity. Media personnel buzzed like persistent insects, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Delegates whispered about the legendary desert shot, exchanging technical notes and speculation. Some were skeptical, others awed, but all were drawn to the anomaly of human skill executed so flawlessly. Harlow entered the hall quietly, her posture controlled, her expression neutral, masking the quiet storm of anticipation she always carried before significant events. On stage, she addressed the audience with a calm, measured voice. The bullet's path was not determined by luck or circumstance, she began. It was determined by preparation, calculation, and control. Every variable was measured, accounted for, and corrected. The shot's perfection was not magic. It was discipline made manifest. If there is a lesson to take from this, it is that mastery is the result of relentless effort and focus, not momentary brilliance. Her words were met with silence at first, the room digesting the magnitude of her message. Slowly, applause rippled through the hall. Engineers, military leaders, academics, and students alike recognized the truth embedded in her statement. It was not the shot itself, they understood, but the method, the principle, and the mindset that mattered. Harlow had given them more than a story. She had given them a blueprint for approaching any challenge with rigor and patience. After the summit, Harlow retreated to a private room. She allowed herself a brief exhale, the first real release of tension in weeks. Despite the applause, the accolades, the endless fascination, she felt a profound solitude. Mastery, she had always known, was a personal journey. Recognition was fleeting. Only discipline endured. The bullet that had traveled 4,000 meters had confirmed her ability to perform under extreme conditions. But it had also reminded her that the path of preparation was endless. Emails and messages continued to pour in. Requests for interviews, advice, and mentorship arrived daily. Some were sincere, from young officers or aspiring sharpshooters. Others were opportunistic, seeking to attach themselves to a moment of fame. Harlow sifted through them methodically, responding only to those who demonstrated commitment to learning and growth. She understood that attention was not achievement action and discipline were in private reflection. She considered the personal cost of such achievement. The desert shot had been the culmination of decades of preparation, but it had required sacrifices. Relationships strained under the weight of her focus. Social events were often skipped for hours of study or training. Sleep had been scheduled meticulously, measured not by comfort, but by efficiency. The bullet had traveled before the sound, but the quiet discipline behind it had traveled far longer. Through years of unseen effort, her mind often returned to the cadets who had witnessed the shot. The young woman who had approached her nervously in the desert became a recurring image. Harlow had inspired more than admiration. She had sparked determination. The cadet's trembling voice, filled with aspiration and awe, reminded Harlow of the silent power of example. The desert had been a stage, but its true legacy was in the minds and hearts that had absorbed the lesson of focus and precision. As her global recognition solidified, Harlow began to contemplate broader implications. Military academies around the world had begun analyzing her methods, incorporating them into training programs. Scholars examined her approach as a model of applied physics, discipline, and human performance. Even civilian leadership programs cited her achievement, emphasizing meticulous planning and decision-making under pressure. Her desert shot had become a paradigm, a story with multiple layers of utility, inspiration, and technical insight. Yet the fame was double-edged. Skeptics persisted, sometimes harshly, questioning whether the feat could be reproduced in different conditions, or whether it was a one-time alignment of luck and skill. Harlow absorbed these critiques with measured calm. Repetition was the true measure of mastery, she reminded herself. One perfect shot proved potential. Consistent excellence proved mastery. The critics' voices, though loud in the public sphere, did not sway her commitment to continuous improvement. She returned to the desert months later, alone. The steel target still bore the indentation, a permanent testament to the bullet's path. Harlow stood in the heat, feeling the wind against her face, the quiet vastness of the valley stretching before her. Here, away from applause and analysis, she reflected on what had been achieved. The shot had been precise, true, and undeniable, but it was the culmination of a lifelong journey of preparation, focus, and discipline. She understood, more profoundly than ever, that mastery was ongoing. In this solitude, Harlow found clarity. Fame, recognition, and legend were ephemeral. The enduring lesson was in the preparation, the countless hours spent refining skills, calculating variables, and controlling herself under extreme pressure. The bullet had traveled before the sound, but the preparation behind it had traveled decades. She had made the impossible visible, yes, but it was the unseen labor that had enabled it. Returning from the desert, Harlow resumed her role as mentor, trainer, and strategist. Cadets who had once doubted now sought guidance with renewed determination. Young officers applied her lessons in their own training, understanding that focus, patience, and meticulous preparation could overcome skepticism, distance, and even fear. The desert shot became less of a spectacle and more of a guiding principle, an enduring lesson in human potential. International attention persisted. News stories, journal articles, and online discussions continued to dissect the event, often exaggerating its difficulty or speculating wildly about hidden variables. Harlow remained measured in her responses, emphasizing that the shot was not miraculous, but the product of preparation, calculation, and self-discipline. Even as the world celebrated, she focused on ensuring the principles endured beyond the story. Through all this attention, she maintained her routine. Early mornings, rigorous mental exercises, precise training, and careful reflection. Her life remained governed by the principles that had enabled the desert shot. Fame was temporary. Mastery was enduring. She continued to mentor cadets, engage in high-level planning, and refine strategies. Each day reinforced the lesson she had imparted. Impossible was only a word. Preparation was proof, and execution was everything. The desert bullet had struck steel with perfection, faster than sound itself. But Harlow's legacy was not the trajectory. It was the quiet, relentless discipline behind it, the demonstration that mastery was attainable through focus, preparation, and courage. The world had witnessed her skill, but the deeper lesson would ripple far longer, inspiring generations to pursue excellence, challenge limits, and execute with precision under pressure. As night fell over her quarters, Harlow reviewed letters and footage one final time for the day. She allowed herself a faint, private smile. Not of triumph, but of affirmation. The bullet had arrived before the sound, but the journey had traveled far beyond the desert. She had proven what could be achieved with focus, preparation, and courage, and the lesson would endure far longer than any headline or media cycle. Asterisk. Years had passed since the desert morning that had transformed General Margaret Harlow from a respected officer into a legend. Yet the echo of the bullet, which had traveled 4,000 meters faster than sound, persisted in the collective consciousness of those who had witnessed it, studied it, or heard its story retold. Military academies across the world cited it as a pinnacle example of precision, discipline, and focus. Engineering students examined its trajectory, physics departments analyzed the environmental variables, and leadership seminars cited Harlow's calm execution as the ultimate lesson in mental clarity under pressure. Despite global recognition, Harlow had remained unchanged in her routines. Each dawn she rose early to review exercises, plan training, drills, and study new methodologies. She understood that legend was temporary. Discipline endured. Fame, applause, and headlines were fleeting. But the principles she had embodied in the desert, the marriage of preparation, calculation, and execution, would persist indefinitely in the minds of those willing to learn. The desert shot had become a touchstone, not merely for military achievement, but for human potential. Cadets who had been inspired by her performance rose through the ranks, applying her methods to increasingly complex challenges. Engineers continued to analyze her shot, refining technology while simultaneously acknowledging the unique contribution of the human mind. In classrooms and field exercises alike, Harlow's demonstration of controlled mastery served as a model of what could be achieved when meticulous preparation met unwavering focus. Yet for Harlow, the impact was more personal. She reflected on the quiet discipline that had enabled the bullet to reach its target. Every calculation, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt overcome had culminated in an instant that was visible to the world. The bullet had traveled faster than sound, but the preparation behind it had spanned decades. Each element of her journey, from rigorous study to repeated practice, from careful observation to instinctive execution, had combined to create an Hanlan event that defied skepticism and inspired awe. In private moments, she considered the skeptics who had doubted her abilities. Initially, their voices had fueled her determination. Now, they served as reminders of how perception could shift over time. Some had challenged the shot's authenticity. Others claimed environmental factors had made it easier than it seemed. But she knew the truth. Every variable had been accounted for, every adjustment calculated, and every movement intentional. The bullet had obeyed physics. Yes, but it had also obeyed the steady hand and disciplined mind of a general who refused to accept limits. The desert itself, long abandoned after that historic day, remained etched in Harlow's memory. She sometimes returned alone, walking among the windswept sand, the steel target gleaming faintly in the sunlight. Standing before it, she could still see the small indentation where the bullet had struck. It was a symbol, yes, but also a reminder of discipline and focus. Nothing about the achievement had been accidental. Every variable, every decision, every second of calm preparation had contributed to a result that others had called impossible. Harlow also reflected on the people she had inspired. Cadets who had witnessed her shot, engineers who had studied her trajectory, and young officers who had absorbed her lessons each carried a fragment of her discipline forward. One young woman, who had first approached her nervously in the desert, years before, had risen to prominence in her own right, citing Harlow as an inspiration. The ripple effect of the shot extended far beyond the desert floor, shaping careers, shaping training programs, and shaping the way people thought about possibility and mastery. The global fascination with her achievement persisted. Documentaries were produced, academic journals published in-depth analyses, and conferences celebrated the alignment of preparation and human skill. Harlow, however, participated selectively. She valued substance over spectacle, focusing on teaching, mentoring, and sharing principles rather than reliving the event for media consumption. To her, the shot was never about fame. It was about demonstrating the results of discipline, calculation, and focus. Harlow's reflections also turned inward. She contemplated the personal cost of her mastery. Long hours alone, endless calculations, and relentless training had come at the expense of social comfort, leisure, and conventional recognition in her early career. Yet she accepted this sacrifice willingly. The bullet had traveled before the sound, yes, but its journey mirrored hers. Long, deliberate, and purposeful. It was the embodiment of preparation meeting opportunity, skill, and courage. One evening, she returned to her office after a series of mentorship sessions with young officers. Letters from cadets and students lay stacked neatly on her desk, each expressing awe, gratitude, or curiosity. She read them carefully, responding with thoughtful guidance, emphasizing principles over praise. Discipline creates possibility, she wrote in one letter. Preparation allows execution. Focus ensures success. The impossible exists only in the mind that accepts it. She knew that the lessons she imparted would endure longer than headlines or acclaim, echoing through the choices of those she guided. The desert shot had also left a subtle but lasting impact on military strategy and training. Officers integrated Harlow's methods into exercises, emphasizing not only technical proficiency, but mental clarity, patience, and controlled execution. Cadets who had absorbed her lessons applied them to increasingly complex tasks, from tactical simulations to leadership challenges. Her single bullet had done more than strike a target. It had reshaped understanding of human capability and potential, demonstrating that preparation could exceed expectation. Harlow often returned to the memory of the moment itself. She recalled standing at the edge of the desert plateau, the rifle steady in her hands, the steel target barely visible in the heat haze. The anticipation, the focus, and the calm determination coalesced into a single action. The bullet had left the barrel and traversed 4,000 meters of air, unseen, silent to human perception, until it struck steel before the sound could announce its arrival. That instant had seemed both eternal and fleeting, a paradox she still marveled at. Yet she also acknowledged that the shot's enduring power lay not in the spectacle, but in the principle. Others could replicate technology, analyze trajectories, and mimic conditions, but the alignment of mind, preparation, and execution was rarer than any formula. The desert had borne witness not merely to precision, but to mastery cultivated over a lifetime. Her success was a testament to the human capacity for focus, discipline, and courage when applied relentlessly. In her quieter moments, Harlow considered what the bullet symbolized. It was more than an achievement. It was a challenge to every person who doubted themselves or their potential. It was proof that impossible was only a word, a mental barrier that could be overcome through preparation and focus. The steel target remained small and unremarkable to casual observers, but it carried a profound story. That human skill, when combined with patience, discipline, and courage, could transcend expectation and leave a lasting mark. Harlow's legacy also extended to her own understanding of leadership. She realized that mastery was as much about inspiring others as it was about personal achievement. By demonstrating unwavering focus, careful preparation, and calm execution, she had created a model for others to emulate. Leadership, she understood, was not about authority or recognition. It was about example. The desert shot had been a lesson in execution under pressure, and its influence extended far beyond the range where the bullet had landed. Even as her legend grew, she remained committed to continuous improvement. Mastery, she believed, was never static. The bullet had reached its target once, yes, but the pursuit of excellence was eternal. She trained, studied, and mentored, ensuring that the principles she had demonstrated would endure. Each day was a reaffirmation of discipline, a rehearsal for the next challenge, and a quiet acknowledgement that the journey toward mastery never truly ends. As she looked back on the trajectory of her life, Harlow felt a sense of quiet fulfillment. The desert, the rifle, the steel target, and the bullet were all elements of a larger story, a story of preparation, focus, and execution. She had achieved something extraordinary, yes, but more importantly, she had demonstrated the principles that made such achievement possible. And those principles would continue to resonate, influencing cadets, officers, students, and leaders for generations to come. In the final silence of the evening, Harlow stood at her window, gazing toward the horizon where the desert stretched endlessly. The world had witnessed her shot. It had marveled, analyzed, and speculated. Yet she knew the deeper truth. Mastery was silent, enduring, and often invisible. The bullet had traveled before the sound, but the preparation, focus, and discipline behind it had traveled far further, shaping lives, lessons, and understanding in ways that no applause could measure. The bullet's journey was complete, but its legacy was eternal.